One day, many years ago, an accident occurred between two babies who were switched at birth. Nagi was the son of a poor family who owned a small diner. His family was not well off. The other child, however, had a completely different fate. Amano was the daughter of a wealthy hotel tycoon, and destiny between them continued 17 years later. The two met again and learned that they were even engaged to each other. However, Nagi already had a one-sided love at school for Sagawa. Unexpectedly, he also had another complicated emotional relationship. It turned out that person was Saki, and she was also Nagi's non-blood related younger sister. At this point, yet another mysterious girl appeared. It was predicted that this girl would also cause Nagi plenty of trouble. As for Sagawa, because her parents forced her to marry a stranger she didn't know, Sagawa decided to run away from home. Unexpectedly, the place she wanted to go was exactly where Nagi and Amano were living. However, Sagawa's actions this time were far too extreme. Even Amano and Saki were shocked about it, since Amano had always thought Sagawa was an honor student, someone extremely gentle and innocent. But everything now went against Amano's expectations, so she couldn't help but be shocked. As for Nagi, although he fully supported Sagawa's decision, without her parents' approval, Nagi felt that this situation wasn't right at all. Meanwhile, Amano was overjoyed to be able to live together with Sagawa, so she didn't think deeply about the consequences. However, Saki didn't want this to happen, because if Sagawa moved in with everyone, it would be difficult to arrange rooms for everyone. Their current house only had 2 rooms. Amano and Saki had already been sharing one room. Nagi then wondered to himself, if he shared a room with Sagawa, it wouldn't be appropriate at all. But for Sagawa, this wasn't a big problem, since the two had already had a chance to stay together once before. But Saki immediately protested, because all 3 of them had their own fiancés. So Saki insisted she must be the only one sharing a room with Nagi. Because of this problem, everyone kept thinking until late at night. In the end, Nagi concluded he would stay in a room by himself, and the girls should learn to get along and live together. However, Nagi's plan failed completely. None of the 3 girls agreed, so Nagi had no choice but to temporarily live in the storage room. Meanwhile, Sagawa would sleep in his room. Nagi decided to endure it until Sagawa returned home eventually. However, Nagi suddenly felt extremely nervous, because he imagined Sagawa sleeping on his own bed. This gave him a very strange feeling. While he was thinking about this, Amano suddenly appeared, startling Nagi. It turned out Amano came because she was still shocked by Sagawa suddenly moving in with them. So Amano still couldn't fully understand the situation. Although Nagi was excited about it, Amano felt it was unrealistic, because when living together, everyone would reveal their bad sides. Unexpectedly, Nagi confidently declared that he would never be disappointed even if he saw something unflattering about Sagawa in the future. However, Amano understood Sagawa's situation, because she herself had once been in a similar position. But when Amano reconsidered everything, she realized the situation wasn't actually that terrible. Even though Amano's biological parents' side it was fine if she and Nagi didn't get married. Amano knew that if they wanted both families to be happy, then her marriage with Nagi needed to happen. Nagi was surprised when he heard Amano bring this up, but she said she was just thinking about it by coincidence. Nagi then intended to refuse the idea, which made Amano immediately angry. She stormed out of the storage room right away. However, sometime later, Nagi began thinking more about the matter, because he had never seriously thought about marriage before. Nagi wonders whether his parents would be happy if he were to marry Sagawa. But even he himself has no idea how things will turn out. The next morning, when Nagi slowly walked downstairs, he was immediately surprised because he saw Sagawa preparing breakfast. Nagi tried to help, but she instantly stopped him, so he had no choice but to sit and wait for Sagawa to finish. Nagi felt extremely excited inside at that moment, because he never expected there would be a day he could taste food cooked by Sagawa. After that, Amano and Saki also arrived. At that moment, they seemed to misunderstand Nagi, because they saw Sagawa busy working, while Nagi just sat there waiting. So Amano became angry. Unexpectedly, Nagi had something he wanted to say to the 2 girls. It turned out he wanted to divide the housework equally, because Nagi was afraid it would trouble Sagawa. It seemed he was very serious about this plan. Even Amano and Saki didn't dare give any opinion. After that, everyone began to act. However, the two girls still weren't used to doing these things. So Amano was a bit clumsy for the first time. Meanwhile, Sagawa remained passionate about making breakfast. However, even by noon, she still hadn't finished, making everyone in the house unable to bear it anymore because they were starving. So Nagi had no choice but to take action. He showed off his cooking skills, surprising the girls. Amano didn't expect the food to taste that good. The other two girls also admired Nagi's cooking talent. However, Nagi suddenly shed strange tears. Even he himself didn't know why it happened. Even after the meal ended, Nagi still felt troubled, because he didn't understand why he cried like that earlier. At that moment, Amano was watering the plants outside, and she accidentally overheard Nagi's inner thoughts. Not only that, Amano even understood the real reason he cried. It could only be because Nagi was feeling happy. And indeed, that was the case. When Nagi was together with the three girls, he felt everything was wonderful. These joyful moments were something Nagi knew he would always remember. The next morning, before Saki left for school, she sat together with her older brother. At that moment, Saki was curious about Nagi's marriage situation. It turned out she wanted Nagi to give up on Sagawa, because Nagi already had a fiancé, Amano. And Amano was also Sachi's biological sister. So what Saki meant was advising Nagi to think carefully. Because if anything went wrong, it would definitely affect many people. While the siblings were talking, Amano suddenly ran over in a panic. It turned out she had something serious to announce. Amano thought that Sagawa might have been kidnapped, because while she was on her way home, Amano happened to see Sagawa, and there were also several mysterious people following her. Sagawa even slowly got into their car and left, which terrified Amano, because she thought Sagawa had been taken away. However, the person sitting in the front seat was actually her mother. So Saki thought this wasn't a kidnapping at all, because Sagawa had run away from home before. But she never contacted her family about it. That was the reason her mother came today to bring her back. Suddenly, Saki remembered that Sagawa might be going to meet her own fiancé today. So her parents forced her to return home. At that moment, Nagi suddenly came up with a special plan. It turned out he wanted everyone to overturn the situation, because all three of them were stuck in similar predicaments. But Amano carefully warned Nagi, since his actions might change Sagawa's entire fate. However, Nagi still remained determined with his choice. So he immediately went to her house to meet Sagawa. At that moment, Sagawa instantly noticed Nagi, leaving her completely shocked. However, Nagi stayed serious about his plan, and suddenly grabbed Sagawa's hand. At that moment, Nagi affirmed that destiny is something one must create by oneself. After that, Nagi recalled the memory of the very first day the two of them met. Back then, he was completely shocked when he heard he had dropped in rank. Because Nagi had always been the top student for 15 years. So he simply could not accept such a thing. And the one who took first place was none other than Sagawa. At that time, Nagi was stunned to know he had been beaten by a girl. Unexpectedly, the results of the following exams were exactly the same, leaving Nagi extremely annoyed, so he stayed home, fully determined to focus and defeat his rival. But when the results came out, Nagi felt disappointed, because his rank didn't change at all. However, Nagi happened to discover something while he was in the infirmary. Even though Sagawa was sick, she was still extremely determined to continue studying. Sagawa even worked much harder than he did. That was why Sagawa always achieved good ranks. Even Nagi eventually began to admire her, because perhaps Sagawa had worked incredibly hard behind the scenes. If Nagi were in the same situation, he wasn't sure whether he could do what Sagawa did. However, Sagawa seemed uncomfortable when Nagi suddenly approached her like that. So Sagawa angrily told him that she didn't want them to speak to each other ever again, leaving Nagi confused, not knowing why she acted that way. And from that day on, Sagawa's personality changed. Even her friends and Nagi were surprised, because Sagawa had become completely different from before. It seemed Nagi had truly fallen for her at that very moment. Returning to the present, after Nagi grabbed Sagawa's hand and ran away with her, she was completely shocked by his action. Meanwhile, Saki, on her way back from school, met an old childhood friend. That girl's name was Mochiuki. After that, the two of them went home to greet Sachi's parents. Because Mochizuki hadn't returned to visit everyone for a long time, since she had been living with her family in China. But now Mochizuki wanted to return to Japan and live independently. Meanwhile, Nagi was having dinner with Sagawa. However, since neither of them had money, they had to eat bread for now. They even shared the same piece together. But this made Nagi blush, because he had never experienced something like that before. A moment later, when Nagi calmed down, he suddenly became curious about their past. Did Sagawa still remember the time she got angry at school? Clearly, she still remembered it. Unexpectedly, Sagawa then shared a few things with Nagi. It turned out she studied so hard in order to have a reason to reject her fiancé. But when Nagi appeared in her life, the reason she suddenly changed like that was because Sagawa didn't want someone like Nagi to get close to her anymore. However, this truth broke Nagi's heart. He finally understood everything was simply to avoid him. But surprisingly, Nagi kept approaching Sagawa anyway. And unexpectedly, she later felt that it wasn't so bad after all. From the moment Nagi confessed to her so suddenly, Sagawa thought that her destiny might have changed at that very moment. Suddenly, Amano appeared out of nowhere, leaving both of them completely shocked. It turned out Amano came to bring them back to Sagawa's house. Because Amano wanted Nagi to apologize to Sagawa's family, since he had acted improperly earlier that morning. But when Amano introduced herself as Nagi's fiancé, Sagawa's mother, Asami, was utterly stunned. After that, Amano shared her own circumstances. She too had experienced something similar to what Sagawa was going through. Things were so bad that Amano no longer wanted to speak with her parents. But after some time, Amano suddenly realized it wasn't that she refused to resist. She was just trying to run away from everything. As for Asami, she believed everything she had done was for Sagawa's own good, because Asami simply wanted to see her daughter happy. But at that moment, Asami began rethinking things. Maybe her actions weren't necessarily the right choice after all. They should have talked to each other more, so that both mother and daughter could truly understand one another's feelings. After that, things became much better, and Amano was the one who contributed the most to resolving everything. So Sagawa thanked her deeply. She even took the initiative to hug Amano to express her gratitude. It was truly fortunate that Amano was there. Otherwise, Sagawa might have faced something far worse. As for Mochizuki, she wanted Saki to take her to Nagi's current place so she could greet him. At that moment, Saki suddenly remembered that before Mochizuki left Japan 7 years ago, she had confessed her feelings to Nagi. Unexpectedly, Mochizuki still remembered that after all these years, and she was still very serious about it. When the two of them finally met again, this was exactly what surprised Nagi the most. Mochizuki even brought up her confession from 7 years ago. But Nagi felt embarrassed. However, that was all in the past. So Nagi didn't want to bring it up anymore. Because now, he already liked Sagawa. However, Mochizuki suddenly reacted strongly, and she revealed the real reason for her return this time. Mochizuki came back because she wanted to marry Nagi. This decision left everyone completely shocked. Because during the time Mochizuki was preparing to leave Japan, she confessed her feelings to Nagi. But it wasn't until the two of them met again that Mochizuki wanted to hear Nagi's answer. And now, Mochizuki had waited long enough for it, since she had finally said everything she had kept in her heart. Mochizuki then turned around and went home. Meanwhile, Nagi still couldn't process what had happened, because everything was happening too fast. It made Nagi unable to fully comprehend it. After that, he decided to chase after Mochizuki, because Nagi wanted to give her a proper answer. He then gave Mochizuki a sincere thank you, because she had spent so many years thinking about him. However, Nagi now already had someone he liked, so he had no choice but to reject Mochizuki's confession from 7 years ago. Unexpectedly, after being rejected by Nagi, Mochizuki showed no negative reaction at all. Even Nagi was surprised by this. After that, Mochizuki asked if Nagi could walk her home, and so the two went together. But a moment later, Mochizuki suddenly stared straight into Nagi's eyes, and he could only stand still, because Nagi had no idea what he was supposed to do next. However, the strong look in his eyes made Mochizuki's heart waver. While they were heading home, Mochizuki suddenly remembered the old bakery. a place filled with memories from when they were kids. So Mochizuki wanted to visit it, and Nagi was also feeling nostalgic. But when they arrived, they were both shocked, because the old bakery had been turned into a convenience store. Although a long time had passed, and both Nagi and Mochizuki had changed, she still wanted to reclaim the place she once held in his heart. Mochizuki was determined to win Nagi over, because he was a precious friend to her. After that, Nagi returned to his parents' house, and he shared with Amino everything that had just happened. This made his father furious, because Amino saw his son getting involved with another girl, even though Nagi already had a fiancé. The two of them then got into a heated argument, and only when Nagi's mother appeared did they stop fighting. A while later, Nagi finally returned home. However, Amano wondered why he came back so late, but then she slapped Nagi, because Amano also thought he was some kind of confession addict. It turned out she misunderstood that even though Nagi liked Sagawa, he also wanted to marry Mochizuki at the same time. Unexpectedly, Amano then had to apologize to Nagi, because she had wrongly accused him. Since nothing was actually like what Amano had imagined, she still wondered who Nagi truly liked. But Nagi suddenly asked her back whether she had ever liked anyone before. To his surprise, Amano became flustered, because she had only attended an all-girls school in the past. So she never experienced anything like this. That's why she didn't know how to answer. Suddenly, Amano ran off to get some fireworks, which Sagawa had bought when she first moved here, for everyone to enjoy together. Nagi then felt regretful because Sagawa wasn't here. After that, Amano seemed to judge Nagi, because Sagawa and Mochizuki were completely different. Yet Nagi liked both of them. But to Nagi, Mochizuki was his close childhood neighbor, while Sagawa was his rival at school, and Nagi couldn't control who he fell for, so he had no clear explanation. Therefore, Amano said Nagi was too easygoing, since he could like almost anyone he talked to. Although Nagi felt a bit embarrassed, he still couldn't deny it. Unexpectedly, Amano also thought that in the future, Nagi might even end up liking her too. Even more surprising was that Nagi believed it could actually happen. Many days later, Saki had something to do, so she dressed up extremely cute. Even Amano found her unbelievably adorable. It turned out Saki had plans to go out with a friend. Curious, the two decided to follow her. They didn't expect Sachi's friend to be a boy. Suddenly, Saki turned around because she felt something was off. Nagi and Amano quickly hid behind a wall. Unexpectedly, the two ended up pressed tightly against each other, which made Amano feel a little embarrassed, while Nagi just wished time would pass faster so he could continue watching what Saki was doing. However, Nagi suddenly became angry because he saw his little sister happily talking to another boy. So Nagi seemed to be jealous. But in reality, he was worried in his role as an older brother. When night fell, the atmosphere between Saki and that boy became romantic. Even Amano couldn't stand it anymore. Suddenly, Saki looked toward Amano and Nagi. It turned out she had noticed them long ago. So Saki revealed that she was dating that boy. This shocked Nagi, who strongly disagreed. However, Saki didn't care at all. She then decided to walk away. But Nagi kept thinking about it endlessly. He was so distracted that he crossed the street without looking, and Nagi got hit by someone. Unexpectedly, it was Sagawa, so the two ended up having a chance to go out together. Nagi then told her that Saki had a boyfriend, but Sagawa didn't react at all, though she clearly knew Nagi was upset. Yet Nagi kept denying it, which only made Sagawa more suspicious. So Nagi finally admitted he didn't feel happy about it. After that, Nagi walked home alone. When he reached Amano's door, Nagi realized Sachi's feelings had gone too far. So he reacted strongly, leaving both girls completely confused. But Nagi had misunderstood, because the two girls were talking about something else completely unrelated to Sachi's love life. This made Nagi extremely embarrassed. The next morning, Mochizuki suddenly came to Amano's house very early. She then began doing all sorts of strange things, until Amano announced to everyone that she would officially marry Nagi. This shocked Nagi, because he himself didn't understand what was going on. It turned out Mochizuki had learned that Amano was Nagi's fiancé, so she wanted to challenge her directly. If Mochizuki won, she wanted Amano to give Nagi up to her. But Nagi suddenly interrupted her, because neither he nor Amano had the right to decide. The decision belonged to both families' parents. However, Amano accepted Mochizuki's challenge anyway, even though Nagi tried to stop her but failed. The reason was that Amano didn't want Mochizuki following her around like that. Mochizuki then led everyone to the place of competition. Unexpectedly, the thing they would compete in was a dart-throwing match. At first, Mochizuki's strange stance made Nagi's siblings suspicious, but she still perfectly hit the bullseye. Even more surprising, Amano also hit the same spot. During the match, the two kept questioning each other, but everything revolved around Nagi. The tension between them kept rising, because neither of them was willing to yield. Mochizuki then seemed to understand the recent situation, because she had not been here before all this happened, so she now wanted to learn more about everything. After achieving what she wanted, she suddenly left, leaving everyone there confused. They couldn't understand what Mochizuki was thinking, but Nagi quickly ran after her. At that moment, he was surprised by what Mochizuki said, because she claimed Nagi was being toyed with by fate. Mochizuki even felt that he was desperately struggling inside it. And indeed, that was exactly the case. Because Nagi currently had a fiancé, and the girl he liked already had a fiancé as well. As for Saki, she didn't want her brother marrying anyone at all, so Nagi no longer knew what to do. If this situation continued like this, Nagi felt like he might die. That was why Mochizuki appeared at just the right time. She was willing to pull Nagi out of his troubles, and Nagi could even move on to a new chapter if he agreed to marry Mochizuki. Because she truly loved Nagi. Unexpectedly, Mochizuki was confessing her love to him, but she left immediately afterward. Yet Nagi's heart was still unsettled, because this was the first time someone had confessed to him like that. It made Nagi's heart race uncontrollably. Amano and Saki saw his current state and became worried, so the two cooked a meal to nourish him, but he still doubted their cooking skills. Then Nagi revealed that Mochizuki had confessed to him, but Amano and Saki reacted in an unexpected way. They mocked Mochizuki's actions, which made Nagi angry, because he knew very well how serious Mochizuki was about this, and that it was a sincere confession she had held onto for 7 years. Nagi felt like they were looking down on him, as if someone like him didn't deserve to be confessed to by Mochizuki. But this was his first time experiencing something like this, so he felt a bit overwhelmed. At that moment, Nagi suddenly thought of Sagawa, because he had once bravely confessed to the girl he liked. He didn't expect the feeling this time to be so strange, but he wanted to see a Sagawa who was like Mochizuki. Nagi immediately rushed to her house, which made Sagawa confused about why he was even there. But Nagi himself couldn't answer that question either, because it was just an impulse of the moment. As for Sagawa, she had been extremely busy these days because the shrine her family managed would soon hold a special festival. This year, she was responsible for organizing the event, so she couldn't avoid the busy workload. A while later, Nagi told Sagawa about the confession, but she didn't show any emotion at all, which left Nagi feeling disappointed, since he thought it would make her flustered. But reality was not like that. Sagawa even sent an invitation to Mochizuki, because the festival would take place the next day, and so everyone showed up the following day. Mochizuki unexpectedly became extremely excited, because it had been so long since she last experienced a festival like this. And also because she got to go together with Nagi this time. So she was really looking forward to it. A moment later, Sagawa appeared. She finally met Mochizuki face to face. But Sagawa's gaze was filled with killing intent, making everyone nearby anxious. Nagi was surprised when people mentioned the cosplay portion, because cosplay was one of the main highlights of the festival, which meant it was something everyone wanted to participate in. Unexpectedly, Sagawa quickly appointed Nagi as the judge, so all the girls became extremely focused, since they all wanted to win in Nagi's eyes. And at that moment, Nagi sensed that something bad was coming. Then everything proceeded as planned. But Nagi seemed nervous, because this was his first time doing something like this. He even had to choose one of the 3 girls to become the winner, which terrified Nagi, because he knew it wouldn't be easy. And the first participant was Amano. The moment Nagi saw her, he recognized her immediately. Meanwhile, Amano remained confident in her cosplay performance. And surprisingly, this was actually Sagawa's idea. As for Saki, her performance was extremely successful. She completely captured the audience's attention, because Sachi's cute schoolgirl cosplay made everyone gasp in admiration. However, Nagi suddenly reacted strongly, because he only wanted Saki to remain his little sister. When Sagawa appeared, she became the contestant Nagi was most looking forward to. And indeed, Sagawa's impact was tremendous. She made the entire audience excited with her captivating appearance. And the final contestant was Mochiuki. She was actually the one Nagi worried about the most, because he had no idea what Mochiuki planned to do for the cosplay contest. Unexpectedly, she didn't just participate normally, Mochiuki actually turned it into a full concert. Her unique and bold performance made the crowd more thrilled than ever. Even Nagi felt the same excitement. At that moment, all eyes were focused on Mochiuki. The next morning, after the contest had ended, Nagi continued rewatching Mochiuki's performance. This made Saki feel a bit jealous. But since Nagi had voted for her the day before, Saki felt slightly better. After that, the two enjoyed the amusement park together, since it was the reward for the winner. Surprisingly, all 4 girls received the same score. But except for Saki, the others weren't interested in going. So Saki ended up being the one accompanying Nagi. However, their relationship started becoming strange, because Saki began having different thoughts about Nagi. She even remembered their accidental kiss. This made Nagi nervous, and he quickly walked away, since he believed it was simply a tiny accident. When everyone returned to school, the students were buzzing about Nagi. They had discovered that Mochiuki was a famous artist. And even more shocking was the rumor that she was dating Nagi. Nagi himself was stunned by this. Reporters even gathered at the school gate, which made Nagi even more anxious. He feared he would get into trouble because of this. At that moment, Nagi received a letter from Sagawa. She asked him to come to the rooftop because she had something to say. Sagawa had also heard about the shocking rumor, and she even thought Nagi was truly dating Mochiuki. But that wasn't the case at all, which made Nagi panic even more. He feared Sagawa would misunderstand, so Nagi immediately tried to prove his innocence. However, Sagawa wasn't angry at him at all. She invited Nagi simply because she wanted to study together. So Nagi felt relieved. It turned out Sagawa had always liked Mochiuki's songs, which was why she invited her to the festival. Because Sagawa was actually a fan of Mochiuki. Even Nagi was surprised by this. He never imagined Mochiuki was that famous. But at that moment, Sagawa suddenly felt insecure, as if she was just a background side character. She felt like she was getting in the way of Mochiuki and Nagi. Suddenly, Nagi stood up, denying all of Sagawa's insecurities. This gave Sagawa more courage, and she began doing something reckless. Sagawa suddenly grabbed Nagi's collar and kissed him on the cheek, which made Nagi completely freeze. But Sagawa quickly ran off afterward, leaving Nagi standing there confused, not understanding anything that was happening. When Nagi was about to go home, he ran into Amano. She had noticed a huge number of reporters outside. Amano was afraid it would affect Nagi, so she led him to a different exit to avoid the reporters. Then Nagi explained everything to Amano. Even Nagi revealed the shocking incident from earlier, about how Sagawa had kissed him on the cheek. He didn't expect Sagawa to immediately say she wanted to cut ties with him, which left him completely unable to understand anything. At that moment, Amano just sat beside him and listened to his story, which made him guess that perhaps Amano had also seen what happened. And indeed, that was the case. At that time, Amano happened to be outside and overheard the entire thing, and she was also very shocked when she learned about it. Meanwhile, Nagi was still feeling depressed, because he had no idea where this situation would lead. His life was getting more and more chaotic. Seeing Nagi suffering like that, Amano couldn't bear to watch him in such pain. She then gently advised Nagi to calm down. They needed to have a family meeting with Saki to find a solution. Unexpectedly, this action from Amano made Nagi feel that she was incredibly trustworthy. Suddenly, Nagi received a message from Mochiuki. It turned out she wanted Nagi to come to her house to listen to music. Because Mochiuki had just finished working on something, so Nagi decided to go there, partly because he wanted to find out more about the dating rumors between them. At that moment, Nagi happened to walk past his parents' restaurant. He didn't expect that because of the dating rumors between him and Mochiuki, his parents' restaurant had become much more crowded. Afterwards, Nagi finally arrived at Mochizuki's house. But when he entered her room, he was shocked to see the entire room filled with pictures of himself. It turned out Mochizuki simply wanted to hang up photos of Nagi. Nagi then brought up the dating rumors between the two of them. Unexpectedly, Mochizuki didn't react at all. It turned out she was the one who spread the rumor. Since she was young, Mochizuki had always been avoided by others, so she didn't have a single real friend. Nagi was the only person who ever talked to her. That's why the two of them later became extremely close friends. Mochizuki now couldn't live without Nagi. And that was exactly the reason she created the dating rumor. When Nagi returned home, his biological mother suddenly appeared. However, Nagi still wasn't used to this, because the two of them hadn't contacted each other for so long. It turned out she came because of the dating rumor involving Nagi. Unexpectedly, Nagi's mom burst into laughter, because she thought the situation was extremely hilarious. Even she knew the rumor was completely untrue. However, if reporters found out that Nagi already had a fiancé, and that the two of them were even living together, then it would surely become a major scandal. So their mother immediately came up with a plan. They would have to stay together in a hotel room. That night, Saki was extremely sad, because she found out Nagi and Amano were staying together at the hotel, while Saki was alone in her small room. At that time, Nagi also became embarrassed, because he was forced to stay with Amano for 2 whole weeks. Although they had lived together before, things were completely different now. However, Amano would try to endure it, because she knew this happened every time trouble occurred. Trying to run away would be useless anyway. A moment later, the staff brought food to the room. Nagi was shocked when he got the chance to taste premium beef. However, he still couldn't help feeling curious about his powerful biological mother. Amano didn't deny anything. She even pointed out many of her flaws. Although their mother looked gentle on the outside, deep down she was very unusual. After that, Amano left the room. Suddenly, Nagi heard a loud scream, so he rushed over to see what was happening. It turned out Amano was stuck on a shelf, because she had climbed onto a chair to reach something. However, Amano couldn't endure it any longer, so she immediately jumped down. Unexpectedly, Amano landed straight onto Nagi's face, which made her blush in embarrassment. Even though Amano was the one who caused this shameful scene, Nagi still felt sorry seeing her like that, so he asked if she was okay. But Amano felt that the next 2 weeks of living together would be very tough. After that, she went to take a bath. However, Nagi had been waiting outside for quite a while, so he began to feel worried. Therefore, Nagi knocked on the door to ask how she was doing. Unexpectedly, Amano was feeling dizzy. Perhaps she had soaked in hot water for too long. Nagi had no choice but to carry Amano to the bed. But while the two of them were talking, their mother was secretly watching through the camera. Amano knew very well that their mother had countless tricks, but at the moment she couldn't do anything about it. So it was best for the two of them to just ignore each other. But Nagi suddenly stared at Amano, surprising her by asking what her favorite color was, which startled her because of the sudden question. After that, Amano began overthinking all sorts of things. While their mother had no idea what the two were thinking, she had no choice but to move on to her next plan. She suddenly pressed a button on the TV, making the two of them panic and cling tightly to each other. Only after calming down did they finally let go. But their mother didn't stop there. She turned off the air conditioner next, causing their room to gradually heat up, and hilarious situations began to unfold, making their mother laugh uncontrollably. Eventually, Nagi finally went to sleep. Suddenly, Amano sat up. She wanted to get some water to drink. Unexpectedly, she accidentally grabbed Nagi's hand instead, but she didn't care and bit down hard on his fingertip, causing Nagi to scream in helplessness. Amano suddenly woke up and realized what had happened, but she told herself it was just a misunderstanding. As for Nagi, he still wondered why their mother did all of this. Even though she wanted to isolate them, she locked them together instead. Amano calmly explained that everything was just one of her mother's games. They were merely chess pieces for her amusement. And indeed, what Amano thought was true. But Nagi thought in the complete opposite direction. He believed this was a test from their mother, to see whether they were truly worthy of becoming husband and wife. At that moment, Nagi resolved not to be defeated by anyone. Meanwhile, Mochizuki was feeling uneasy because Nagi hadn't replied to her message yet. The one she had sent earlier. The next morning, Nagi woke up and was surprised because Amano had already finished breakfast. However, when Nagi saw the pile of bread, he immediately felt fed up. Because for Nagi, mornings must be eaten with white rice. Right then, Amano responded, saying that Nagi was demanding too much. He even criticized the daily meals. Amano then strengthened her resolve, because she knew her mother was watching them, and probably thought Amano would cry and beg to leave, or even try to break down the door to escape. But this time, Amano would show her mother a completely different version of herself. No matter what happens, she would be the one to decide her own life. Meanwhile, Saki was at the shrine with Sagawa. Saki was proudly showing off her academic achievements. But Sagawa only cared about Nagi, because he didn't come to school that day either. This made Saki troubled, because she knew the truth behind the situation. But Saki couldn't reveal the secret, even though she knew the other two were being confined by their mother in the hotel. Their mother suddenly turned on the TV. She asked Amano and Nagi how their life in captivity felt. But Amano didn't react at all. So their mother immediately came up with a new plan. She created a game that came with a special reward. The winner would get whatever they wanted. Nagi became excited after hearing that and agreed immediately. Then the TV showed a picture of Amano when she was little. Amano instantly buried her face into the bed out of embarrassment. When their mother asked Nagi who that girl was, he confidently answered that it could only be Amano. And so, the game continued. Unexpectedly, their mother remembered many details from Amano's childhood. Nagi was extremely surprised. He realized their mother must truly love Amano very much, to be able to remember all those things. Meanwhile, Nagi himself didn't know much about Amano's past. But at present, she was always cheerful and full of energy. And Nagi had witnessed all of that, from when they used to live together before. Instead of looking into her past, Nagi chose to look toward the future. He looked at the Amano of today when thinking about marriage. But this made their mother irritated, because it reminded her of her own husband. After that, she decided to let them off for a day, simply because she was busy with work at the moment. After both of them won the game, Amano requested a tablet so she could pass the time, while Nagi asked for study materials. He wanted to use his free time to review his lessons. Suddenly, a hand appeared out of nowhere, frightening them both. Even Amano fainted from shock. It turned out to be Mochizuki. Mochizuki didn't expect Amano to be that timid. She then grabbed Nagi's hand and tried to pull him away from the place. But Nagi immediately refused Mochizuki's idea. He believed running away wasn't a good solution. Nagi insisted on staying at the hotel, even though he didn't feel comfortable there either. But after recalling Amano's words, he knew that running away wouldn't solve anything. Mochizuki was amazed upon hearing that. She didn't expect their relationship to be that strong. They helped each other grow in a positive way. However, that was family, not love. Mochizuki then began scolding Nagi, saying she had abandoned her family just to return to Japan. She had confessed to Nagi countless times, yet all she received was coldness. It felt like Nagi didn't care about her at all. At that moment, Amano regained consciousness. Mochizuki immediately stood tall and confident. She wanted to have a frank conversation with Amano. And it seemed Amano wasn't afraid of her at all. But Nagi felt something bad was about to happen, so he quietly tried to escape. However, both girls saw him and stopped him instantly. Mochizuki then got straight to the point. She wanted her rival, Amano, to cancel the engagement, but Amano had already thought about this before. However, she simply couldn't do that, because the reason she lived with Nagi was to become independent. It was true. Amano used to be a completely different person. Compared to back then, she had improved tremendously. But if they cancelled the engagement, then nothing would remain between them. Mochizuki felt the situation was turning in her favor. So she pulled out a marriage plan board for everyone to see. It turned out Mochizuki wanted to marry Nagi. She promised she would stay home and be a gentle, devoted wife. Mochizuki would even handle all the housework. On the surface, it seemed like a great plan. But Amano said it was completely unrealistic. Nagi tried to stop the argument, and he was honestly happy that Mochizuki cared so much about him. But Amano made it clear to everyone, marriage does not always bring happiness. Yet Mochizuki absolutely refused to accept that. At this moment, Nagi felt that the situation might go further. So he intended to stop the two girls. But it seemed things would not be that easy. Suddenly, the situation changed dramatically. Because after the argument earlier, the two girls finally understood each other better. At the same time, they also realized many things. Meanwhile, Nagi was completely confused, since he had just seen the two girls arguing earlier. But now they suddenly made up so abruptly. At least both of them had calmed down. Everyone then discussed a new plan to get out of here. Unexpectedly, Mochiuki had already prepared a safe hiding place beforehand. After everyone finished discussing the plan, the two girls ran off ahead, leaving Nagi alone in utter confusion. Suddenly, their mother appeared out of nowhere. It turned out she had already known about their plan. However, at this point, both mothers had changed. She only wanted to protect her children. But now it seemed like that was no longer necessary. She then allowed her children to do whatever they wanted. After that, Amano rushed straight into the room. She questioned why Nagi was being so slow. Amano then dragged him out first. But once everyone was in the car, she kept nagging non-stop about Nagi's actions earlier. However, Mochiuki also admitted that part of it was her fault. She would reflect and act more carefully next time. Suddenly, Nagi was kicked out of the car, while Amano continued riding with Mochiuki to another place. After a while observing the surroundings, Nagi suddenly jolted in surprise, because he was standing right in front of a shrine gate. Then he saw Sagawa walking toward him. This made Nagi incredibly excited, since it had been a long time since they last met. Nagi followed Sagawa into the house. After that, he drank a cup of tea after a long day. However, Sagawa still didn't say a single word, which made Nagi a bit worried, because he feared that Sagawa might still be angry with him. But things were not as Nagi imagined. Sagawa had already heard the entire story from Mochiuki, and after hearing it, she made a strong decision. Sagawa would no longer be a background character. She would stand up, face every challenge, and become a main character. At that moment, Nagi also became excited because of Sagawa's determined words earlier. As for Amano, she would move to her biological parents' house for a week. However, Saki was visibly disappointed, because that person wasn't Nagi. As for Sagawa, she invited Nagi to go take photos together. But at first, he thought she was just asking him out to hang out. But unexpectedly, Sagawa wanted to take wedding photos. And the bride and groom were none other than the two of them. Hearing this made Nagi instantly thrilled. He immediately agreed to Sagawa's request. However, her mother suddenly stopped the two of them. It turned out she already knew about Nagi's previous engagement, and even about his recent scandal. In the end, Sagawa's plan could not be carried out. So Nagi decided he would fix the situation. Instead of giving up, Nagi came up with a plan to change Sagawa's mother's mind. So he began cleaning the house. Even Sagawa's mother was shocked by the neatness. What was even more surprising was that Nagi cleaned everything by himself. He didn't stop there. Nagi continued cleaning the hallway. It became so shiny that it was unbelievable. However, none of Nagi's actions changed anything. He still couldn't win Sagawa's mother's approval. When Nagi walked out into the yard, he suddenly apologized, but Sagawa burst into laughter. It turned out that this was exactly her mother's personality. Therefore, Nagi needed to stay even more persistent than this. It turned out that Sagawa had always been persistent in the past as well. Mainly because she had been fighting against her own mother. And over time, Sagawa gradually grew stronger for the future. Unexpectedly, before Nagi could resolve this worry, another worry suddenly came crashing down on him. This time, it was Sagawa's father's turn. He was furious that someone was trying to woo his daughter. Sagawa's father decided he would handle this himself. At first, Nagi didn't know who this man was. But once he learned that it was Sagawa's father, Nagi instantly panicked out of fear. The father then challenged him to a wrestling match. If Nagi could win, he would be allowed to marry Sagawa. After that, the father got into position to start the match. Seeing that, Nagi immediately followed suit. However, he was certainly no match for Sagawa's father. Even though Nagi tried his best to push the man down, and even had Sagawa cheering for him intensely, the result was still the same. He was thrown far away by her father. Nagi quickly surrendered on the spot. Unexpectedly, Sagawa's father praised him, because in this sport, winning or losing wasn't important. What mattered most was the courage one showed before the match even began. At that moment, he also revealed that his own marriage had been arranged. When the two first met, Sagawa's mother had been terrified. She even cried a lot, because she realized she was about to marry such a giant of a man. So after they married, Sagawa's father began wooing his own wife all over again. To achieve the happy family they had today, he had gone through many hardships. Although it had been difficult, deep down he was truly happy. Because Sagawa's mother was an amazing person, and he wanted his daughter to marry someone whom she truly loved. Later on, Nagi happened to see Sagawa looking sad, because her mother had rejected the idea of taking photos. It turned out she feared that Sagawa's current fiancé would get angry if he found out. But Sagawa firmly rejected this arranged marriage, because she knew she could never find happiness in a marriage decided for her. At that moment, her mother grew angry. She refused to let her daughter say such reckless things. The atmosphere began to grow tense. So Sagawa's father rushed in to stop it. He thought things might calm down, but instead, he got scolded by his own wife. However, Sagawa's father didn't fight back at all. But just as the argument reached its peak, Nagi suddenly opened the door to speak up. Even though Sagawa's mother always acted harshly toward her husband, she still watched him closely and understood him very well. This showed that she loved her husband deeply. At that moment, Sagawa's mother became embarrassed. She tried to dodge the conversation, while Sagawa kept thanking Nagi. Because thanks to him, she understood her family better. Even though Nagi had only been here for a few days, he had already understood this much. It was truly something surprising. On the following day, while Sagawa moved closer to fix Nagi's clothes, he suddenly remembered their previous kiss. Nagi hesitantly asked Sagawa about it. He thought that kiss had only been an accident. But unexpectedly, Sagawa replied very straightforwardly, "No kiss is meaningless." Even more surprising, she smiled and said she had been looking forward to that vow-like kiss. As for Amano, she was currently helping her family with their business. Some customers were surprised by how hardworking she was, because they knew her family background wasn't ordinary. They didn't expect Amano to be this diligent. She then smiled and explained, it turned out Amano was doing that because she wanted more experience. Meanwhile, Saki suddenly became jealous, because their parents only paid attention to her older sister and didn't care about her. However, Saki was also worried about Nagi, since she didn't know how he was doing at the moment. Seeing that, Amano immediately comforted her little sister. She said maybe Nagi was just studying together with Sagawa, and Amano then reassured Saki that Nagi would definitely be fine over there. But something even more unexpected was waiting for them. At that moment, Saki received an anonymous letter. She froze on the spot, unable to believe what she was seeing. Mochiuki also received the same type of letter. Somehow, after only a few days of living together, Nagi and Sagawa had gotten married. The next morning, Nagi was praised by Sagawa's father for looking good in traditional clothing. But Nagi himself felt terrified. Yet all that fear vanished as soon as Sagawa appeared. She was breathtakingly beautiful. Even Sagawa's father couldn't control himself. He rushed over to compliment her dazzling beauty. At that moment, Nagi didn't know what to say. His heart was beating wildly. Sagawa's mother also arrived. Even then, she still hadn't fully approved of the two being together. But this was only a fake wedding. Then Amano suddenly appeared. She was curious about their wedding. However, she accidentally wore a white dress matching the bride's, so she felt guilty. But Amano then said she wanted to have a wedding like theirs too. Except she wanted hers to be even grander. A little later, everyone stepped into the ceremony. But Sagawa had hinted beforehand that she was preparing a big surprise. Even though this was just a fake wedding, Mochiuki gave an amazing performance. After the ceremony ended, Mochiuki wanted to sing one more song for Nagi. Although it lasted only a moment, her presence completely captivated Nagi. While Mochiuki was waiting for the ceremony to start, she wondered about Saki, but Saki wasn't here today. Amano revealed that her little sister was staying home to study for exams. Then the bride and groom slowly stepped out, making Sagawa's father extremely emotional. Even though he knew it was only a fake wedding, strangely, the emotions felt incredibly real. Nagi felt the same. He even thought the two of them might actually become husband and wife. Just as they were about to touch lips, Saki suddenly appeared. She had come to oppose this marriage. Saki even burst into tears, begging Sagawa not to take her brother away. It seemed like Saki had misunderstood, because they were only having a fake wedding. So Nagi could only sigh and pull Saki outside. He then explained everything to his little sister, that the whole thing was fake. Surprisingly, Saki already knew the truth, but she didn't understand why she felt like this. It turned out Saki felt that Nagi was enjoying this too much. Because if it had been before, he would never have agreed. Instead, he would rather stay home and study. And now, he hadn't realized how much he'd change. That was what made Saki angry. At that moment, Nagi began to understand. He admitted that maybe he really had changed. Nagi used to always find excuses to avoid things like this, because he knew nothing except studying. But after spending time with the three girls, he suddenly realized that he would get married someday. Nagi then patted his little sister's head and said, his biological father once told him that if Nagi and Saki got married to each other, it would actually make perfect sense. But he immediately refused. If Nagi had known earlier that the two of them were not blood-related, then perhaps they would have ended up getting married. However, Saki was shocked by her brother's words. She didn't understand what Nagi was talking about. After that, everyone returned to the venue to continue the party. At that moment, Amano suddenly made a suggestion. She also wanted to have a fake wedding. Although it was unexpected, all three agreed. They would take turns taking photos with Nagi. Even though it was fake, it was enough to make Nagi extremely nervous. The three girls took their turns taking pictures. And finally, it was Sachi's turn. Nagi suddenly became nervous. He told Saki not to force herself too much. But she didn't stop there. Saki suddenly closed her eyes and kissed Nagi on the lips. This shocked all the girls. They couldn't understand what was happening. When Nagi began explaining, Saki cut him off. She thought they were supposed to kiss for real. So she took the initiative. But this made Nagi visibly upset. Because he had said from the beginning that everything was fake. And above all, the two of them were still siblings. Nagi absolutely could not accept this. Saki then raised her voice in response, saying it was all just a misunderstanding. And then she immediately ran off. As for Sagawa, she felt the atmosphere had grown gloomy. So Sagawa handed out gifts to every guest. It was her way of showing gratitude. However, Amino decided to take Nagi's gift as well. At that moment, Mochiuki realized that the people approaching Nagi weren't the true threat. The real one was Saki. Everything seemed normal for Nagi's family. But Mochiuki had long sensed something strange about their sibling relationship. Back to Nagi. He was still shocked about the kiss with Saki. He couldn't forget that shocking moment. Nagi told himself that he was only Sachi's older brother, so he shouldn't think too much about it. But Saki sat up angrily. Because everyone kept bothering her brother. It made Saki feel uncomfortable. So she only did that to make everyone be quiet. But she didn't expect things to go this far. Saki knew this could easily lead to misunderstandings. Because their relationship was still that of siblings. She even burst into tears, unable to understand herself. Luckily, Amano comforted her, and that was how the story ended there. Finally, after many days passed, Nagi was allowed to return to his familiar home. His biological mother had finally let them go. Now the two of them could enjoy life as before. However, Nagi was surprised because when he stepped inside, he found the Amano sisters already there. Today, they wanted to celebrate after 2 weeks of isolation. At that moment, Saki said she wanted to eat the meal her brother cooked. But Nagi suddenly raised his voice. He unexpectedly said he wanted to be alone. It turned out Nagi still remembered that kiss. It kept replaying in his mind. After that, Nagi just wanted to confirm whether it was really an accident. A while later, he went out to buy food. Saki insisted on following him. But Nagi coldly told her not to. Then he immediately left. However, Nagi couldn't stop blaming himself. And Saki wasn't doing any better. She felt sad because her brother was still upset about what happened. Seeing this, Amano immediately comforted her little sister. Perhaps Nagi acted that way simply because he was hungry. And from that point on, Nagi kept finding ways to avoid Saki. When it was time for dinner, Amano tried to ease the tension. However, the two siblings couldn't talk to each other, making the atmosphere in the house grow more awkward. Nagi even wanted to just go upstairs to study. At that moment, Amano suddenly flipped the entire table. The two siblings were afraid the food would be wasted, so they used their bodies to catch the falling dishes. Afterwards, Amano decided to leave, her purpose being to let the two of them solve the problem together. But since they were still hungry, they continued eating first before dealing with the issue. A moment later, Nagi straightforwardly asked Saki whether she had fallen for him. The sudden question made Saki startled. She immediately became embarrassed. In truth, even she didn't know how she felt. However, she also felt uncomfortable because everything had gone way too far. Nagi, on the other hand, felt relieved because the two of them were not blood-related. Nagi then felt lighter inside when he realized that the two of them actually had many things in common. Step by step expressing their feelings might actually be a good thing sometimes. Thanks to opening up to each other, their bond became even closer. A moment later, Amano was delighted after learning that the siblings had made up. One day, Amano went to her father's office. Her goal was to negotiate a secret issue that even she didn't want to deal with. Their school was preparing for a festival, a traditional event that had existed for over 50 years. Everyone voted for Nagi to be the class representative, which made him confused. Students were free to perform, and the winner would be chosen by the entire school. However, Nagi refused to do it. He strongly opposed the decision, but no one agreed with him. As for Sagawa, when she heard Nagi would participate, she volunteered to form a group as well. Her goal was to support Nagi. Sagawa even asked Amano for permission to allow her and Nagi to form a team together. Since Amano was Nagi's fiancé, although Amano pretended to agree on the outside, on the inside she wasn't happy at all. Sagawa then mentioned a legend saying that if two people team up for this event, they would surely end up getting married. Nagi immediately blushed out of embarrassment, thinking Sagawa was confessing to him. But the truth wasn't like that at all. Sagawa's real goal was the prize of 10 cafeteria meal tickets. For someone who loved eating like her, that was an amazing reward. On the way home, Amano was annoyed by Nagi's smug expression. But she couldn't blame him, because this was a chance for Nagi to train with Sagawa, the girl he had always secretly liked. So for Nagi, this was a rare opportunity. Meanwhile, Amano had to partner with Asuma. When everyone gathered to practice at home, Nagi wondered why Asuma was also there. While the two were arguing, Asuma appeared. It turned out he already knew everything that had happened recently, including the fact that Nagi had been engaged to Amano. A moment later, Nagi returned to the main topic. He didn't know what performance to choose. However, Amano had plenty of ideas if they wanted to win. They needed to come up with something interesting. As for Sagawa, she pulled Nagi aside to think of an idea for their performance. However, the two of them suddenly ran into an embarrassing accident, making Sagawa blush and apologize. Because she was nervous, that incident happened, but to Nagi, it was actually very cute. Since Sagawa was sometimes adorably clumsy, it was something Nagi had never seen from her before. While the two were getting closer, Saki suddenly showed up. She was curious about what was happening between them. Meanwhile, over on Amano's side, the couple was preparing a very extravagant performance. Even Amano believed they would surely win first place. But when Saki gave her opinion, Amano's dream shattered. However, it was only because Saki was jealous, since she also wanted to do something like that. As for Sagawa, she already knew the group would run out of ideas, so she had prepared a video of the previous performances that had successfully won first place. At that moment, Amano suddenly realized the girl in the video was actually her mother. Even Nagi was extremely shocked, since he couldn't believe that was the same mother he knew now. But Amano was certain it was her, because she had seen the old photos before. Returning to the past video, the girl pointed toward her future husband. They were Nagi's parents in the present. After that, the two of them confessed in front of the crowd. But the girl was rejected by the man. Although they didn't know what happened afterward, the two ended up winning first place in that event. At that moment, Amano remembered she could just ask her mother about the story. After waiting a while, her mother finally returned from work. She was ready to answer all their questions. Unexpectedly, the truth was that she wasn't the girl in the video at all. But none of them believed that. It turned out to be one of her jokes. Many years ago, Amano's father was the one who planned everything. It was actually a joint plan between the two of them. Even the rejection during the confession was part of the plan. But after that, the couple became famous. In the end, all of their questions were finally answered. Everyone then went back to their own homes. The next morning, while the two were planning, Nagi suddenly wanted to switch teammates. And the one he chose was none other than Amano. Even so, Nagi himself didn't know why he did that. Unexpectedly, Sagawa immediately agreed. Then she said she wanted to team up with Asuma. And just like that, the four of them swapped members in an instant. A while later, Asuma and Sagawa returned home. Meanwhile, Amano was shocked by Nagi's actions. But even he couldn't understand himself. However, to Amano, the most important thing Nagi needed to do was to sincerely apologize to Sagawa. So the next day, Nagi ran to see her. Unexpectedly, he received a powerful kick from Sagawa. It was probably her way of getting revenge for being abandoned by Nagi earlier. So he had no choice but to accept his punishment. When Nagi returned home, he asked Amano to confess to him at the school festival. And then he would immediately reject her. However, for Amano, this was absolutely not easy. She flatly refused this plan. As for Nagi's parents, they were extremely surprised to hear that he would join a school activity. Since Nagi usually stayed home studying, clearly, he had changed a lot. At that moment, Nagi's parents planned to attend the festival. But he didn't want them to do that. Suddenly, a strange young man drove a car to the front of the shop. At that moment, Saki happened to be on her way home and noticed the guy. She thought he was Nagi, because the two of them looked extremely similar. But things were not what she imagined. However, Saki became very curious about the situation. When the school festival officially began, everyone around was surprised, because Nagi's parents also joined the event. Even Nagi's friends were shocked when they learned that Saki was actually his little sister. However, Saki immediately started nagging her older brother, since the event was still ongoing. Yet Nagi was focusing on studying, which Saki simply couldn't understand. A while later, Amano arrived. It turned out she came to invite Nagi, because she wanted the two of them to explore the festival together. While walking, Nagi accidentally bumped into the guy from earlier. But he had no idea who that person was. Returning to Amano, she was really happy to experience this festival. Perhaps partly because Nagi was with her. At that moment, Amano expressed how happy she currently felt. But Nagi had no idea what was going on. He believed that Amano was hiding something from him. Amano suddenly flinched, perhaps because she realized Nagi had sensed something. However, Amano didn't want to reveal her secret. So Nagi decided not to press the issue. Finally, the most intense part of the competition arrived. Each contestant performed their act one by one. And the parents were extremely excited, wanting to see how their children would look on stage. Unexpectedly, Saki and Mochiuki were paired together. And they had prepared an adorable singing performance. Their show was extremely polished. Even the judges rated it very highly. Next was Sagawa's group. They were considered the most promising pair of the year. So everyone was eagerly anticipating them. However, Sagawa suddenly announced her withdrawal, making everyone freeze in shock. Next came Nagi and Amano's performance. Unexpectedly, Nagi revealed their relationship, as well as the secret from long ago about the childhood hospital incident. But things didn't go according to plan, leaving the two of them extremely embarrassed. At that moment, a male student from another school approached them. He suddenly used harsh words to attack Amano. Unexpectedly, Nagi bravely stepped forward to protect her. Nagi was truly angry, and he managed to teach the guy a lesson he would never forget. Even their relatives were shocked by Nagi's righteous action. But the outcome wasn't what they hoped for. Nagi's group was suspended from school for 4 days. Because of that, Nagi stayed at home regretting his actions. He also felt guilty because he couldn't win the event together with Amano. But Amano's reaction was full of gratitude. Since Nagi didn't hesitate to defend her, that was what made Amano the happiest. And then she gently gave Nagi an affectionate kiss, hoping to cheer him up. At first, he didn't react at all. But when Amano left the room, Nagi's heart began to behave strangely. It beat uncontrollably, making it impossible for him to stay calm. When night fell, he walked down to the living room. Saki was already there. Surprisingly, she knew exactly what had happened earlier, because she had accidentally witnessed it. She was curious about Nagi's feelings. But unfortunately, He refused to share such a sensitive topic. After that, Amano appeared, forcing the two of them to face each other once again. At that moment, the two of them sat down to talk seriously. However, Nagi only felt fear. Even he didn't know what he himself was thinking. Then Nagi informed her that Saki had seen what happened between them earlier. This shocked Amano greatly. Many days passed, and Nagi didn't know how to face Amano after the two of them shared their first kiss. That moment kept replaying in Nagi's mind, making him unable to concentrate on studying. At that moment, Sagawa suddenly appeared, and she even brought food for everyone. Amano was very happy that Sagawa came over. Then the two of them sat down to eat together. Unexpectedly, Sagawa also knew about Nagi's kiss, which surprised Amano greatly. She wondered how Sagawa found out about such a secret. At that moment, Nagi, standing outside, heard the entire conversation. He was extremely nervous, because he feared Sagawa might misunderstand.